Hi, I'm Pam Fox. Welcome back to my study in the book of Revelation. We're in chapter 17. In these two chapters, 17 and 18, they're primarily focused on Babylon, you could say. We're focusing on the beast, on the harlot, on Babylon. Some of these things they're very integral. They're integrated. But John dedicates two chapters to the topic of this so-called Babylon. And I think it's interesting because a lot of times when we think about or when we study end times, we focus on the Antichrist and his agenda, and we don't focus a whole lot on this harlot or this Babylon. And some people think they're one and the same, which they may be. That's not my understanding, but we're going to look at this today, and we're going to try to get a better understanding as to who or what Babylon is. And there are many different interpretations. Some people think Babylon is a literal city or a literal nation or a literal country. Others say that Babylon represents a group of people or a system that the group of people rule. Again, when it comes to these different concepts that we study in end times, I don't think it has to always be either or. There can sometimes be a lot of controversy or disagreement as to how to interpret some of these things. And to me, why can't it be, both, either or both? And so when I study this, the conclusion I come to is that it's not an either or type of a thing when it comes to Babylon. Is it a city? Is it an actual city? Is it an actual nation? Is it an actual country? Is it an actual religion? Is it an actual person or group of people or a system? To that, I have concluded in my study that it's yes to all of the above. It's not one or the other. It's yes to all of the above. And we're going to see that, and I'm going to point that out as we go through chapter 17 today. I really wanted to go through 17 and 18 because they are so connected, but it would take me a couple of hours to do that. So we're going to go ahead and do 17 today, and then we'll do 18 next week. But I think this is really exciting and fascinating stuff, personally. So let's go ahead and begin. I'm in the King James Version, Revelation chapter 17, verse 1. And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. Now we just got through with chapter 16 where John was shown the seven vials being poured out onto the earth. And now one of these angels that was pouring out these vials comes to John and wants to show him another vision. Okay? Come hither, I will show thee the judgment of the great whore. Now, as we're going through this chapter, I'm going to refer to the great whore as the harlot. I will refer to her as the harlot. Let's look at that really quick. So I'm in my eSword, which has the Strong's Concordance built right in. This is a desktop system that you can download onto your desktop that has the Strong's built right into the Bible, which the Strong's is the Hebrew and the Greek dictionary or concordance. So when I pull up my Strong's here and I look at that, go back to verse 1 and we look at the whore is, it's a Greek translation, or it's a translated word from the Greek of porne or porni, which means a strumpet, figuratively an idolater, a harlot, a whore. And when we think of idolatry, remember that idolatry, simply put, is when we go against God. It's when we decide for ourselves what's good and evil. It's when we make up a religion for ourselves and decide what's most important, who's most important, where our focus should be, where our affections should be, instead of believing what God says those things should be. That's idolatry. Idolatry can look different in a variety of ways. Like usually the most obvious form of idolatry would be someone that worships other gods besides the one true God. But really, idolatry comes in many forms, and it has to do with going against God and going against what God says and deciding for yourself what you're going to believe, right? That's idolatry. So back to this verse 1, he's going to show John this harlot, and he's going to show John the judgment of the harlot that sits on many waters. So here we have a couple of clues as to who this harlot is, and we're going to see later her name is Babylon the Great, and that's why we refer to her as Babylon. And we're going to get into some of the origins of Babylon, and we're going to talk about that today. But a couple of clues here. So we have John being shown the judgment of the great whore sitting upon many waters. Well, what do we know about? Well, I just looked that up. We know that she's a strumpet, she's an idolater, she's a harlot. Okay, and if we just think about our own common sense and what we know about a whore or a prostitute, this is a woman or a person who trades. Who deals in trade, right? So there's a transaction that takes place where one receives money or favors and the other receives a service. And what does God say about that type of, what does he say about idolatry? What does he say about prostitution? What does he say about fornication? These are things that are unrighteous or unholy as far as God is concerned. They're things that he tells us not to participate in. They're things that are considered ungodly, unholy, unrighteous, evil. So when we start to look at some of these words like idolatry, the harlot, the whore, these are things that God considers righteous or unrighteous. He considers them unrighteous. So we see this harlot, and we kind of think to ourselves and get an understanding of what that means to be a harlot, an idolater. And then we also see her sitting upon many waters. John sees her, he sees a woman, a harlot, sitting upon many waters. Well, what does that mean? It can only mean one thing, and that's that this harlot sits upon the whole world. She sits upon the whole world. Oh, and I forgot to bring up this verse. In my studies earlier this week, where was it? I wonder if I could bring it up really quick. It was in the Old Testament. I did a study on the phrase many waters, and I found that in the Old Testament, I found this scripture that talks about the Lord also sits upon many waters. So it may be bad news that this harlot sits upon many waters or the whole world, but the good news is that our Lord also sits upon many waters or the whole world. So this harlot sits upon many waters, which means when we think of the earth, and the many waters that are on the earth, whether it be the seas, the oceans, the rivers, the springs, the fountains, the lakes, there's many waters, and they're all connected, right? All the water is connected to one another, unless you're talking about a swamp. But even then, like, the water goes into the ground and it goes back into the air and it comes back down. It's all connected. So this harlot sits upon many waters. She's everywhere. The harlot is everywhere. She's on the face of the whole earth, which means that whatever or whoever this harlot is, she has infiltrated the whole world. Whatever she is about, these deals that she makes, this idolatry that she is a part of, it's infiltrated the whole world. Okay, let's move on to verse 2. With whom, so John sees this harlot on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. Let's stop there just for a second. So now we have to understand that this harlot has committed fornication with the kings of the earth. Which kings of the earth? It doesn't say. It says the kings of the earth. So we could presume that this is talking about all the kings, all throughout history, up until today, leaders of the world. Maybe not all of them, but at least a lot of them. That the harlot has deals or interactions with all the kings of the world. And commits fornication with them. And so this word fornication, we already looked at that, but let's look at it again in the Strong's. This word, well, we looked at the whore before. This word is porneia. And the definition is harlotry, including adultery and incest, figuratively idolatry or fornication. So we need to have a good understanding of what the word is talking about here when it says fornication. Because you and I, when we hear that word, we just think sex, right? We might just think, sex outside of marriage. But fornication is another, the origins come from this idea of idolatry, which are things that are unrighteous, unholy in the sight of God. When it comes to God, there's either something, if you think about something, it's like, oh, is this good or bad? And you think, well, what does God think about it? You can ask yourself the question, well, does God think this is righteous? Does God think this XYZ is righteous, or does he think it's unrighteous? And of course, you can go to the Word of God to find the answers to that. But when it comes to idolatry, it's a practice of things that are unrighteous. And it's a going against God. So this harlot has committed fornication with kings of the earth, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So the inhabitants of the earth is humanity. It's the people of the earth, and it says that they've been made drunk. So if we think about this word drunk, there's some obvious kind of connotations that come along with it. It's this idea of being in a stupor, of stumbling, of not being aware of your surroundings, of making poor choices that have difficult consequences. This idea of drunkenness, God has warned us against this idea of drunkenness. The Bible never tells us we can't drink alcohol, but we are warned against drunkenness because of all of the things I just said, right? When it comes to drunkenness, you're playing with fire. You're playing with fire. So this harlot, she's in the whole world. She has dealings with all the kings of the earth, and those dealings that she has with the earth, the fornication, the idolatry that she practices, it makes the people of the earth drunk, or unaware, or in a stupor, or making poor choices that have difficult consequences. Okay, let's go on. Verse 3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, which I find interesting because we see the wilderness throughout the Bible, and I don't really know if this has any meaning, but I just think it's interesting because Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days where he fasted and he was tempted by Satan. The Israelites were lost in the wilderness for 40 years. End times prophecy says that the Jews will flee into the wilderness where God will provide for them and protect them during an invasion. So we see this wilderness come up from time to time, and here we see it again, and I really don't know what the meaning it is, but I just think it's interesting that it keeps coming up. So he carried me away into the wilderness, and he says, I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So he sees this woman sitting on a scarlet-colored beast, and he gives us some information about this beast. He says it's full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. We've seen this before, so let's look at it. In Revelation chapter 13, which we've already gone through, in verse 1, we saw, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns. Put a pin in that. And upon his heads the name of blasphemy. I'm going to read a couple more verses here. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were the feet of a bear, and the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. So in Revelation 13, at this point in the story, it's giving us a glimpse of the rise of the Antichrist and the height of his power, where people are going to worship him, right? He's been given authority from Satan. He's been given power. He's been given his seat, right? And people are going to worship him, and they're going to take his mark. So this is a depiction or a picture of the rise of the Antichrist and the height of his power here in Revelation 13. And it's also telling us a little bit more about this harlot, because John sees her riding on a beast that's described in the same way as this beast. So we know that she's riding upon the Antichrist. Let's go back to chapter 17, Verse 3, so he carried me away in the spirit in the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having seven heads and 10 horns. Now you'll notice one difference here, and that's that in Revelation 13, at the rise of the Antichrist and the height of his power, not only does he have 7 heads and 10 horns, but upon his horns, and remember, horns are symbolic for power or authority, upon those horns, 10 crowns. So at the point of Revelation 13, which is the rise and the height of the power of the Antichrist, not only is he going to have 7 heads, 10 horns, but he's going to have 10 horns. He's going to have these 10 crowns. And we see here that this is when he has great power and his seat and his authority given to him by the Antichrist. Going back to chapter 17, as this harlot is riding on the beast, we don't see those 10 crowns. We don't see this great authority. We don't see the seat and the power given to him by the dragon or Satan. So at this point in the story, and I know Revelation, it bounces all over the place, but that's why it's important to understand it, to kind of get an idea as to what they're talking about. At this point in the story, this beast hasn't risen to this great power as of yet. At this point in the story, the beast is being ridden by the harlot. Okay, now when you think of riding, like when the person is on a horse, the person riding the horse is in control of the horse, at least usually, right? Or ideally, the person riding the horse is in control, but there's a participation that's happening, right? A partnership. And the horse can buck off the rider and regain control. The horse can even trample the rider and harm the rider. But in general, when you think of someone riding a horse, that it's the rider that has the control, right? That does the steering and has the control. Here, this is what I see. I see the harlot sitting on the beast and having the control. And there's a partnership here. They're together, which means there's a like-mindedness as to where they're going. But the harlot is in control. So back to one more time, verse 3. He carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So the scarlet is riding the beast. The beast has the 7 heads and the 10 horns, but doesn't have the power, doesn't have the crowns yet. Verse 4. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So here John is seeing this woman arrayed in purple and scarlet color, which we know in Bible times this was an indication of wealth or royalty, to have fabric that was colored purple or scarlet. These were more of a rare fabric. She's decked, it says she's decked with gold. She's covered in gold and precious stones and pearls. And she has a gold cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. This woman is rich. John is seeing a representation of great wealth in relation to this woman, this harlot. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery. She has 3, you could even say 4 names written upon her forehead. Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and you could say the mother of abominations of the earth, because there's not a comma there. So mystery, comma, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and abominations of the earth. So her name is Mystery, her name is Babylon the Great, her name is the mother of harlots, and her name is the mother of abominations on the earth, which means she is the mother of, which means from her comes unspeakable, unmentionable, sinful, unholy things. So let's just stop for a minute and kind of summarize what we know about the harlot so far. We know that we know that she's a whore who sits upon many waters, and I wanted to bring this. I wanted to go down. I want to skip down to verse 15 really quick, where it says, "And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." So later here in this chapter, the angel is going to kind of decipher some of these symbols. And the first one he deciphers is, "The waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And remember, we see this phrase repeated several times in Revelation, this idea of nations, tribes, tongues, and kindreds. And we see it repeated kind of in that way, maybe in a different order, several times throughout the book of Revelation. And it's being very clear in those instances what it's talking about. It's talking about all people of the earth besides the Jews. It could include the Jews, but it's talking about all people of the earth. Because remember, the Jews always thought of people in two categories. There were the Jews, and then there was everyone else, the Gentiles. And God makes it very clear in Revelation that his promises, his goodness, salvation, everlasting life, it's meant for all people. It's not just meant for his original chosen people, the Jews. It's meant for all people. And I find it really interesting here because just this one time when Revelation is talking about these peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations, it changes ever so slightly, and you might miss it if you're not paying attention. The one change here is it adds in the word multitudes. And when we do a word search on the word multitudes in our Bible, we'll see it come up several times in the Bible. We see it come up several times describing the Jews in the Old Testament, in the promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that through them would come a multitude of people, which would be the Israelites. We see that repeated a lot in the Old Testament, this multitude kind of talk. We see it again in the New Testament, in the Gospels. Jesus' followers were often referred to as multitudes. And then we see it again here in Revelation when this particular group of people is brought into the throne room of heaven. They're referred to as a multitude. Why do I bring that up? Because here John is being told by the angel that this harlot sits upon all the waters of the earth, which are all peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues, which means she has infiltrated all people, all nationalities, all people, all different languages, and all multitudes, which couldn't just mean a lot of people. But I can't help but wonder if it's not talking about Christians and Jews, okay? That she has infiltrated religion itself, including Christianity and Judaism. Maybe, maybe not. Let's go back up and discuss again what we know about the harlot so far. So she's a harlot or an idolater that sits on many waters, which is the whole world. She commits fornication with the kings of the earth. That is, she has dealings with the kings of the earth. Whoops. Transactions that would be considered unrighteous with the kings of the earth. She's full of she's very wealthy, extremely wealthy, and she is the mother of other harlots, which means from her comes more people that are like-minded with her, or more entities that are like-minded with her, and come abominations of the earth. So at this point in this story, I can't help but think that the harlot is not a person, it's not a place, but it's a group of people, and it's the system in which they control. And I want to take a closer look here at her names, starting with Mystery. Mystery in the Strong's, I'm going to pull this up here. Excuse me, when I click over to the Strong's, there it is. Okay, number 3466. Mystery is mysterion, the Greek mysterion, and it means to shut the mouth. Okay, a secret or mystery, though through the idea of silence imposed by initiation into religious rites. So this mysterion is this idea of shut your mouth, keep a secret, initiation into religious rites. I mean, it's really painting this picture here of a secret society, of keeping secrets, of the things that take place in the darkness that shouldn't be come out into the light. Okay, mystery. Her second name is Babylon the Great. Okay, and when we look into the origins of Babylon itself, we start to get a better understanding as to what it is we're talking about here. So I thought we would go ahead and bring that up, going back to the origins of Babylon in Genesis. So I'm in Genesis chapter 10, and I'm going to read verses 8 through 10, and then we're going to skip down to chapter 11. So Genesis chapter 10, verse 8 says, "And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth." This Nimrod, he began to be a mighty one in the earth. And some translate that word mighty as to being a giant, a literal physical giant. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, where it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord, in the beginning of his kingdom, Babel. Now, when we look at this word, where it says he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, when we look at this word before in the Strongs, it actually means against. I'm not going to pull it up because I get lost so easily when I skip from chapter to chapter. I wrote it down over here. Against the Lord. Or rebel. The word Nimrod means rebel or to rebel. So this Nimrod was a rebel against the Lord. You could even say he was a mighty hunter against the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel in the land of Shinar. Okay, so I'm going to skip down to Genesis chapter 11, verse 1. And it says, "And the whole earth was one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, and they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said to one another, Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and slime," pop up there, "and slime for mortar." Now, some would say that this, going back to these origins in Genesis 11, would be the origins of the Masons when they first started making bricks to build buildings. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven." Put a pin in that. "Whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." So I'm going to stop there for just a second. They want to build a city with a tower that will reach to heaven, and they want to make us a name. They want fame. They want power. They want to have a city. At this point in time, God had told the people to disperse throughout the whole earth after the flood. That was his command, was to spread out over the whole earth and populate it. This group of people is saying, no, let's stay right here and build us a city and a great tower where we can be at the top, and we can control all the people, and we can control the great wealth, because that's how you control great wealth, is if you have all the people together, you install fear in them, you control them, and you can control the people, and you can control the wealth. So he says, "Let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one," or the people are one, which sounds like it would be a good thing, right? Jesus said Jesus is I and the Father are one, and he wants to make it so that his people and him can be one in him and in the Father, and it's all great, right? But here, these people are against God. They are one with each other, being each other like-minded, wanting to create fame and power and wealth for themselves and be against God. But there's no inclusion of God here. They're not God-fearing people. So he says, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do. And this they begin to do. Build this city and this tower, even though I told them to go out into, throughout the world." He says, "Go to, let us go down and," I skipped a very important part. Verse 6. "And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do now. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do." God is saying that these people, they are one. They are like-minded. They have one language. Nothing's going to stop them. And he's going to stop them, although he's not going to destroy them. And literally, he's not even going to stop them. He's just going to slow them down. Let's read on. "And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language," or confuse their language, "that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. In other words, they stopped building the city. They were scattered. And this could be when the continental divides occurred. the land was all one mass, and then the continental divided, and then the land separated. Or maybe it was just a horizontal rapture. I don't know. Maybe God just like, you go there, you go there. I don't know. But they were scattered. They were scattered. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did confound their language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. So here we see some of the origin of Babylon itself. And of course, we'll see the rise of Babylon later, and we see it overturned in the year 539 BC. Interestingly, Babylon was not destroyed, it was overthrown in 539 BC, but we are going to see here in the next chapter, Revelation 18, we're going to see it become desolate, which is come to naught. It's going to be entirely decimated. Babylon. And again, is this a person? Is this a group of people? Is it a system? Is it a nation? Is it a city? What is it? So this harlot, her name is Babylon the Great. Her origins come from here in Genesis, Babel, the Tower of Babel, where God delayed these people from doing what it is they wanted to do. We saw the rising of Babylon again, and it was overthrown, and it was a very wealthy, prosperous place. And I was even reading in this book that I'm reading, You Can Understand the Book of Revelation. Let me just bring it up really quick. There's a project called The Future of Babylon, and it was actually began, it says here, by Saddam Hussein, which of course he's gone now, but he was trying to rebuild Babylon in its now known geography of Iraq. And at the time of the writing of this book, apparently our government was actually supplying money for this project, known as the Future of Babylon Project. Now, I didn't look it up to see if this project still exists. But some say that when Babylon is taken down, it will be a rebuilt version of Babylon, and it will be a very specific geographical location. We don't know. We can only speculate. But again, as I read on and as we study these two chapters, the conclusion I come to is that this harlot is upon the face of the whole earth, which means she has headquarters everywhere. She has headquarters everywhere. And she's the mother of harlots and of abominations of the earth. So who is she? Who is she? She's a secret. Shh, shut your mouth. She keeps secrets. This past year for me, these past couple of years, we've all heard of probably secret societies and this idea of the small group of elite being at the very top, controlling everyone underneath. This pyramid, we see the pyramid on our money, and we see all types of symbols that are supposed to represent these secret societies. Their languages were confounded, so they had to resort to speaking to one another through symbols and symbology. I personally have never given much thought to this idea. I've kind of poo-pooed it as conspiracy, or maybe it's true, but what can I do about it? In this past year, I've thought about it a lot more, and I've looked at the world through that lens a lot more. And what I see is that there are people in positions of power all throughout the world who have a great deal of power, who have a great deal of wealth. Many of these people we've never heard of. Some of them we have. But they're all throughout the world in a variety of what we consider systems, like our government system, our health system, our education system, our religious system, our military system, our commerce system. And we're going to see in the next chapter, it's going to go into a lot of detail about the commerce system when Babylon falls. So there is this idea, or this theory, that when it comes to the harlot or Babylon, she is a group of people that have really been pulling the strings since its origins, going back to Babel. A group of people that want fame, they want power, they want to control everyone else, and they want to control the wealth. And again, when you start to look at the world through that lens, you start to see it everywhere. My son was just pointing out to me recently about all these, these ads and marketing towards sneakers, towards, very expensive shoes that all the kids have to have. These young boys want to spend hundreds of dollars on a pair of sneakers that they could get mobbed for and their shoes stolen right off their feet. This convincing of people that they have to be or look or have a certain thing in order to be cool or to be popular or to be beautiful or to be smart or to be whatever. It's this deceit. It's this convincing of people in order to control them and in order to control the wealth. And that's really important. And we see that, of course, myself as a health coach, and I'm not going to get too much into this because I like having my social media platforms and I don't want to be censored. But as a health coach, one of the things I learned when I was becoming certified as a health coach is I started to become very jaded towards the pharmaceutical industry. Now, pharmaceutical industry, there have been medicines throughout modern history that have saved many, many lives. So there's good and bad when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry. But there have been many medicines that have harmed people as well. Medicines that are tested and tried, approved by the FDA, only later to be recalled because they're harming people and they're even killing people. But usually, oftentimes, they'll just kind of reformulate those medications, repatent them, and put them back out on the market, which tells me that the pharmaceutical really doesn't care about the health of the people. They just care about making the money. And of course, the big pharma is very powerful and very, very wealthy. So that gives you kind of an indication of what I'm talking about here. This idea of a system that has infiltrated the whole world, all of the systems. There are people in position of power within those systems that are attempting to control all of those systems so that they control the people and so that they can control the wealth. It's all about power. So this harlot, if I'm right, is a group of people that control the system. Okay? It's a society of people who control the system or are trying to control the system, and they've had a lot of success over the years. Let's go on. Verse 6. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, and when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. So here's something else we know about this woman. She's drunken with the blood of the saints. Now, if I would have read this 5 years ago, I would have thought this to be extremely figurative. What we know now about the satanic customs and rituals that include blood, this could be figurative and very literal. I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints. Now, the saints, of course, are believers. Also the blood of the martyrs. Those are people who die in their faith for Jesus. She's drunken with their blood. So she's bloodthirsty. And you could even say, going back to this idea that there's a group of people that control the systems, the military systems, and being responsible for all the wars that we've had because of this infiltration by the harlot and her power-hungry, control-hungry, wealth-hungry needs. And here, blood-hungry, okay? So I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, and when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Now, this word admiration is wonder, great wonder or awe. So he's looking at this woman and just going, whoa, wow. She's beautiful. She's probably seductive. She's bloodthirsty. She wants all this control. She has all the dealings with the people, the top kings of the world. These transactions, these dealings. She keeps a secret, and he's just like, his mind is blown. So he wonders with great admiration. And the angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? Or why are you marveling? It could be translated, why are you marveling? I will tell you, he says, the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her. Which hath the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. Okay? So here he's talking about the beast that she's riding on. John sees her riding on this beast, and he says that the beast was, is not, shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. Perdition means destruction. What does it say here? Ruin, loss, damnable, destruction, die, perish, waste. Okay? So the beast is going to, he says it was not, which is this idea that we see, again, going back to, did I pull that up? I didn't. This idea of this mortal head wound that the Antichrist, that they allude to, that it's going to, the beast will be alive and then it will be dead and then it will come back to life. Here we have a bit of a spoiler alert. This angel is saying that the beast you see, it is not, it shall ascend. It was, it is not, it shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, which again we saw in, what was it, chapter 13 that we just read, and go into perdition, which we'll see in chapter 19 when Jesus throws this Antichrist into the lake of fire. And there's victory. He's defeated. So a little bit of a spoiler alert there, but the angel puts it pretty clear. He was not. He's going to ascend from the bottomless pit. We see that in chapter 13, and then go into perdition. He says, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder. There's the earth dwellers again, non-believers. They that dwell on the earth shall wonder. They'll also be in awe of this Antichrist. They shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. So here, this angel is talking to John really at a place and time where the beast was and is not. So he was alive and now he's dead, but he's going to yet come. He's going to rise again to new power. So at this point, when John sees this harlot sitting on the beast, again, he hasn't risen into power. He hasn't been given authority or his crowns from the dragon. He hasn't been given great authority. Let's move on. Verse 9. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. Here is the mind which hath wisdom. This is where you need to pay attention. Here is the mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Now, many people have speculated over the years that this is referring to Rome, because Rome is the city of 7 hills. Okay? I would like to offer an alternate theory that these are 7 empires. She sits on 7 heads that are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. It goes on to say, and there are 7 kings. So if there are 7 kings on these 7 mountains, to me that means 7 empires. And as we go on, you're going to see how the scripture supports this idea that she sits on 7 empires. What's an empire? It's a dynasty, right? That come and go. These different dynasties that come and go, or empires that come and go, who rise to great power. She has been infiltrated and in participation with and really mastery over these 7 empires. They're her empires, this system, these elite people, this society. So she sits on the 7 mountains. It says, and there are 7 kings. It says, okay, 5 are fallen. So again, this is being spoken to John at a time before the Antichrist rises to great power. So he says 5 are fallen. So these 5 dynasties or empires have already fallen at the point that this angel is talking to John. He says, and one is, which could very well be Rome, because at the time that John was alive, Rome was the dynasty of the world. One is, and the other is yet to come. So another great dynasty or empire is going to rise in the future. And when he cometh, that is this king of this empire or this dynasty, he must continue a short space. So this particular futuristic dynasty is going to have a short lifespan, a short space. Verse 11, and the beast that was and is not, and even he is, and so he's good. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, which is the 8th king. So he's talking about 7 kings here, but he says there's going to be an 8th. And he's of the 7. So they're in cahoots. These 7 kings, the harlot, the Antichrist, they're in cahoots. Okay? And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth in perdition. Again, a spoiler alert. He's going to go into perdition. He's going to be defeated by Jesus. Verse 12. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet. So there's going to be 10 so-called kings. They're not really kings, okay? But they are going to be given power like kings. They're not actual kings. The 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings for 1 hour with the beast. Now this is important because when we do a little word study on the word hour in the book of Revelation, we see something very interesting. Okay. It comes up in Revelation. Uh-oh. It comes up first in Revelation 9, verse 15. So, and we've already talked about this. This was the sixth trumpet. Okay? So the four angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year were released to kill a third of mankind. Now the number of the army of horsemen was 200 million. I heard the number of them. Okay, so at this sixth trumpet, these four angels are going to be released who had been prepared for an hour, a day, and a month, and a year. This is an appointment, a very specific hour. It's an appointed hour that will happen at its appointed time. There will be no delay. There will be no postponement. There will be no rescheduling. This is a very specific, that's why it says an hour and a day and a month of a year. It's a very specific hour in time that the four angels will be released for what they were prepared to do. They will have an army of 200 million. Okay? And I believe that this is and will be the fall of Babylon. This army of 200 million that will be released at the sixth trumpet for a very specific hour. Here, going back to chapter 17, verse 12, the kings, he says, no kingdoms yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. And we're going to see in next week's chapter 18 that 1 hour is going to be repeated 3 times. We'll go ahead and look at that today, but it's going to be repeated 3 times that Babylon is going to come down in that 1 hour. What does this mean? Some people have theorized that it means a nuclear war. She sits upon many waters, though. I have a feeling that this harlot, this one that's going to come down, that's going to be made desolate, it's all throughout the world, in headquarters all throughout the world. And this 200 million army is poised and ready all throughout the world. And when it's activated, it's going to do its thing. And the harlot is going to come down. The system, which you could call the old world order, that it's going to then transform into the new world order, which will be the rise of the Antichrist. A lot of time there's a lot of talk about this new world order because the writing is really clear on the walls. It's not really a secret if you're paying attention that the powers that be want to transition into a new world order. I never really thought of it as like a switch being flipped and just like, okay, boom, we're in the new world order. It's really, there's been this old world order or this old system that's been in place since Babel, okay? And then when the harlot is destroyed, which we'll see in chapter 18, that's when the Antichrist can rise to power and unroll his agenda of I'm God, worship me, and here's my new system of, one monetary system. Take the mark, then you can buy and sell. It's as simple as that. Just take the mark and you can buy and sell. That's it. Very simple. So let's look at this really quick. Just a second. In Revelation 14, chapter 6, we see this is one of my favorite parts about Revelation. We already went over this in chapter 14, the 3 angels and Babylon's fall. Now this is really interesting because with these 3 angels become 3 separate events, but they're in order, and we know that because of the way it's worded. And there followed another angel, and the 3rd angel followed them. So these 3 angels take place in order. So what's the order? Verse 6, and I saw an angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. There's going to be an angel that will preach the gospel to everyone. What good news. Praise God that he cares so much about us that he's going to send an angel to preach to the whole world. Saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. There's the hour of his judgment. Okay? And when we see the fall of Babylon, it will be due to the hour of the judgment of God. Okay? So the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of the waters. Let's go ahead and go through these really quick. That was the first angel. A proclamation of the everlasting gospel and a warning to worship God, for the hour of his judgment has come. The next angel says Babylon is fallen. That is the judgment of God on this harlot. Okay, and there followed another angel is saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So Babylon is taken care of. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast in his image and receive his mark on his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. So it's another warning to the people on the earth. Yes, the harlot has fallen, but now here's the warning: don't take the mark. Don't worship the Antichrist. Put your faith in Jesus Christ, even if it means dying in your faith. All right? Because the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. All right, let's get back to 17. He must continue a short space, was and is not, even is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 kings which thou sawest are, or the 10 horns are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as of yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind. That is, these 10 kings and the beast. Really what I see here as we go on. Okay, we got disconnected, but I'm back. Let's go ahead and get through this. We're at verse 13. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. Again, another spoiler alert. John is being told by this angel, Jesus is going to be victorious. And this is one of my favorite verses in the book of Revelation. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. Who's that? That's us. That's the church coming back with Jesus for this great battle, the called, the chosen, and the faithful. Who are the chosen? God's chosen people, Israel. Who are the called? Believers. We read about that in Romans, the ecclesia. And who are the faithful? Those who, the martyrs, those who are martyred in their faith unto the end. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. We already went over that. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Again, going back to Revelation, was it 14? The 6th trumpet, Revelation 9. They're going to be burned with fire and brimstone. Let me find that really quick. A third of mankind was killed by the fire and the smoke and the brimstone which came out of their mouths. So when this harlot, when Babylon comes down at the 6th trumpet, it's going to be because of this coup, for lack of a better description. The Antichrist and the harlot, they're in cahoots. These leaders, the society, these people at the top, they're in cahoots. They're all in cahoots. But the Antichrist wants to be at the top. He wants to have all the power. The harlot is riding him, but for 1 hour, these 10 kings, they're not really kings, but they're going to be given the power, and they're going to give their power to the Antichrist. To do what? To invade the system, the harlot, and all the different headquarters throughout the world, and to take it down. Okay? Upon the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate, and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will. So it's God's will to take down the harlot. It's God's will to take down this system that's been implemented and in place since the Tower of Babel. It's God's will to say it's over, and to exercise his judgment upon the system, or the harlot, or this group of people that have infiltrated the whole world, and they're everywhere. They're everywhere. He says, for God hath put it in their hearts. He's going to use the Antichrist. He's going to use these 10 kings who are going to come together and revolt against the harlot. He's going to put it in their hearts to do so, and they're going to do so. They're going to, and they are going to kill the harlot, but it's really God's wrath. They're going to fulfill God's wrath. It's going to fulfill through them, through the Antichrist, and through these 10 kings. It says, fulfill his will and agree. That is, the Antichrist and the 10 kings, they agree and give their kingdoms unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. So at this point, the Antichrist will have all the power over the earth, because the people at the highest positions of power are going to give all their power to the Antichrist. Verse 18, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So he's saying that the woman that you saw, she is that great city. Babylon is the great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So Babylon, the harlot, the system, the group of elites, they reign over the kings of the earth, which means they reign over the earth. But she's coming down. She's coming down in chapter 18. In 1 hour. Really quick, let's just look at that. We'll look at that next week, but really quick, I pulled this up, so I might as well go ahead and show it to you. 3 times in chapter 18. Verse 10, standing afar off for fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. The city is going to come down. The system is going to come down. The elites that are in charge are going to come down in 1 hour. Verse 17, for in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood far off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning. And verse 19, and they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. That's commerce, that's trade. All that were made rich, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. So next week, when we get into chapter 18, we are going to see the whole point of these 2 chapters. And it's God telling his people to come out of the system, which again is on the whole world. It's in religious institutions. It's in the educational institutions. So what I see is this warning, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. It's God's loving kindness, once again, warning the people who will be on the earth at that time to come out of her, because his judgment is going to fall upon the harlot, and she's going to be destroyed in 1 hour. And if you're mixed up in that, you're going to be destroyed with it. So there's going to be this warning, come out of her, my people. How do you come out of her? I'm not really sure. If she's everywhere and she has headquarters, we can kind of look at this and determine where these headquarters might be. I mean, all throughout history, people have kind of theorized who Mystery Babylon is. Is it Rome? Is it New York? Is it LA? Is it the US? Is it China? And if you start to look at some of these metropolises, like LA, for example, it's on the port. And we're going to see in chapter 18, we're going to see a great millstone being thrown into the sea from heaven, which I believe is going to cause probably a major tsunami on the coasts and make it desolate. But it's this idea of coming out. Don't be participating in any religious institutions, whether it be Judaism or Christianity or whatever. Go home, right? Don't be in the schools, don't be in the hospitals, don't be, because at this point in time, there's really going to be no point to be at work at this point in the story. You're going to be looking for food, you're going to be taking cover, you're going to be trying to survive, you're going to be reading your Bible, hopefully, you're going to be praying that God will find you worthy to escape at some point or give you courage to, lay down your life so that you can have everlasting life. But there's going to be a warning to come out because the wrath of God is coming down on the harlot. And the harlot is all over the world. So it's going to happen in various places throughout the world. And a third of mankind is going to die in this sixth trumpet, this destruction of Babylon. So, I think that's the whole point of this warning. And, prayerfully, I won't even be here for this if I understand, the coming of, Jesus and the rapture, the saving of his church and the rescuing of his people. Maybe I'll be able to see it from heaven looking down, but I won't be in the midst of it. And my prayer is for, obviously, for you, that will be the same for anyone that's watching. And of course, in order to be rescued, we have to belong to Jesus. We have to be his. So if you're on the fence and you're just, you're not sure if you want to belong to the Lord or if you want to put your faith in him or how can you believe in someone that's not even here, I would encourage you to read your Bible. Read the book of John and let the power of the word begin to teach you and to soften your heart and to give you wisdom and to help you to believe in Jesus. It is hard to believe in someone we've never met or seen, and we're just going by faith. But as you read the Bible and the power of the Word of God begins to permeate your heart and your spirit, you'll believe. You'll believe in Jesus. And so believe it in your heart and confess with your tongue that Jesus Christ is Lord. That's how we become born again, and that's how we receive the salvation of our God. All right, thank you so much for watching. God bless you, and we'll see you back here next week.